Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you like what you see here, everything is for sale. We're waking up with watches, and most of the prices are in the description below. But you can reach out to me at tmosso@thewatchbox.com for full purchase pricing, condition, box, paper, and accessory information. If you're looking to sell or trade a watch, we are always looking to build inventory. Reach out to me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. We pay cash, we pay fast, no upper limit on value paid. We will buy an entire collection. This is your email concierge. All right, let's jump into something that's a little bit unusual. A 36 millimeter Rolex Oyster Perpetual. So, of course, this is the lovely yellow dial that gives the watch a little bit of a 1970s Stella aesthetic. So those old star-inspired dials from the Day-Dates and the Date-Justs lend their basic look to this modern 70-hour power reserve anti-magnetic water-resistant chronometer. Now, the watch is 100 meters water-resistant, is highly anti-magnetic, it is shock-resistant, and it uses the latest expanded mainspring, thinned mainspring barrel, revised powertrain, and chronogy escapement to eke out just under 3 days of power reserve. Now, the watch wears well on a smaller wrist. This is the reference 126000. Taking a quick look at the dial. Let's get a look at this discontinued reference, highly attractive, yellow by day, and blue chromolite lume by night. I have a surprising amount of Rolex here on the counter. Oops, looks like I lost the light. Let there be light. Okay, now, given a choice between a colorful watch and one that's mostly grayscale, I'd normally go with color. Then again, I do love my auto racing, and the Daytona is the motorsports-inspired chronograph. Now, this is the latest reference, launched back in 2016, and it's an easy watch to wear. Compared to something like a 40 millimeter GMT or the previous 40 millimeter Submariner, this really wears nothing like them. The case is much finer, as you can see the lines, as well as the thin profile. It's only 12.2 millimeters thick. It's a graceful thing. It's somewhere between a dress watch and a sports watch in terms of case design, but there's no doubt about the bezel and the dial. That is very much sporting. Of course, with the ceramic bezel, the watch is less susceptible to scratching, and I would say that of the two versions launched in 2016 in steel, the black dial and the white dial, it seems like the white dial ultimately won the war. There are more of them, but at the same time, people tend to seek them more frequently. This is a timepiece that offers a lot more contrast too than the black on black. Now, let's take a look at something that gives you a lot of functionality for a much better value proposition than you would get at Rolex. Now, though this is a 41 millimeter watch, there is no doubt this is a larger timepiece. The Sinn 103 is a pilot's chronograph that is rated as a 41, but wears more like a 42 or a 43. We'll pop it open, throw it on my wrist. You can see the case lines are derived directly from the well-known Sinn Easy M1. You can see that in the shape of the lugs. Thrown it on the wrist. The watch is a wonderful full-service companion. Now, in this day and age, you can absolutely wear a sports watch as your dress watch. There's no reason you couldn't wear this with a suit or take it to the office. Now, the timepiece is reasonably flat for a Sinn. They're always fairly chunky and substantial watches. And then taking a quick look at the underside, though this is not a dive watch, it does feature a clasp with a diver's-style extension if you want to use it over a suit, which could be anything from a swimsuit to a flight suit. We also have Sinn's hex screws inside the removable links. The idea is to make it harder to accidentally round off the removable links. When they're flathead screws, it's quite easy to do. When they're hex screws, it's a lot harder to do. You can apply more torque without imposing damage. Now, on the reverse side, you can see that this watch is 20 bar water resistant, so 200 meters, quite a bit for a watch that's aviation inspired. Lovely varnished syringe style hands. Turn the light off. Oops. All sorts of crazy things happening with my light today, but I have all the light I need here thanks to Sinn. And note, the watch features a luminescent index inside the bezel that makes it super easy to start timing something using the minute hand. Now, I've got two different timing instruments going. I've got my timing bezel, which you'll note is a count-up style, and then I've got my chronograph. I've also got a day and a date, and they both have a quick set. The watch is powered by a 7750 internally, and it wears quite nicely. It also features a bezel that is bi-directional rotating and a lovely domed plexiglass-style sapphire. Okay, here we have a fascinating trio. This is the first time on the show that I have put all three green Submariners together, and I couldn't resist the opportunity to compare these side by side, because before the debut of the 2021 redesign of the Submariner, I had predicted that Rolex would effectively combine the first two with a ceramic bezel and a black dial, and that is exactly what they did. Now, where I was wrong was my prediction that the next green Submariner, the next lunette vert, or green bezel, was going to be a no date. Well, we definitely got a Submariner date. If anything, Rolex went for the biggest crowd pleaser, and the Submariner date is the best seller. You can see here we have a 41mm case, though you wouldn't know it just from looking at it next to the 40mm case. They appear almost identical, both in case lines and in size. And in fact, it's very difficult to find divergent dimensions, as they're the same thickness, and from lug to lug they're about the same length, with the main difference being the end link to end link distance across the wrist, which differs only by 0.7 of a millimeter. Now, taking a quick look at the second generation green sub that debuted back in 2010, this remains my favorite of the group. It's nicknamed the Hulk, but when the watch first came out, Rolex described this dial as a green gold compound. Now, I'm not sure why they changed their marketing. Maybe it didn't meet any established standard for gold, or maybe they wanted to be more circumspect in Islamic markets where that could be taboo, but they stopped calling it green gold. They never changed the composition, though, so I do believe gold remains an important part of the material that is deposited onto this dial. Now, this is a sunburst metallic dial. If you look at the original green sub from 2003, which was the 50th anniversary Submariner, and you look at the latest, you can see both of these dials are black lacquer, so glossy, gleaming, almost like wet paint, really attractive. And both of them feature plenty of luminescence. This green sub was the first sub to feature larger Yachtmaster style maxi indices for better legibility. Of course, we have a different green, as the bezel is anodized aluminum, whereas here it is ceramic. And of course, with time comes refinement. You can see that this is a solid end link, but a hollow center link bracelet. When we pop it open, we do have extensible elements inside, but it has to be snapped out. So while you have an extension there, it's not as easy to access as the glide lock in the later watches. This is the second generation green sub, and you can see that we have here 20mm of adjustable length in 2mm increments, so 10 different stops. It's considerably more adjustable with a larger range than, say, Rolex Easy Link, which is just 5mm. Now, this watch has the same movement as this watch. Very few changes here. What really changes mechanically is the arrival of the 2021 watch with its 70-hour power reserve. And of course, we still have a special diving clasp, and internally you can see glide lock returns right there. We'll do a wrist shot with each of these, and we may as well do a lume shot as well, since it's important to track the changes in these dials. All right, what have you got for me, Rolex? You can see that to the left, we have the original green sub. It uses superluminova, whereas the more modern green subs use Rolex's proprietary chromolite blue lume. Okay, put the Rolex away for a little bit. Now let's talk about something that is offbeat after we do our wrist shots. So the original feels the most like a vintage watch, and that's entirely down to the bracelet. With its stamped clasp and hollow center links, it feels like something from another era. And by another era, I don't necessarily mean the 2000s when it was made. This feels like a much older watch. Now, throwing the second gen watch on the wrist, again, this is my favorite. Green on green. It might be the thing in 2021 and 2022, but at the time, it was quite unusual for a full green Rolex sub to populate the catalog, as nothing like that had ever been offered. It's a good looking watch, but visually, even though it's also a 40mm, it does seem like a bigger watch, more like a 41 or a 42. That said, and maybe this is the oddity, when we do get to the 41, it doesn't seem any bigger than the 40. It seems exactly like the 40 I just wore. Both of them are attractive watches. I have no preference between them from a fit or feel standpoint. I just like the green on green dial. All right, back to 2019, 50 years since Apollo 11. We knew it was going to be a big anniversary for Omega, and Omega did not come up short. So this is the 50th anniversary Apollo 11 Moonwatch, and it's got a lot going on. So you can see they used a new yellow gold that is pale, almost having the appearance of vintage 14 karat, and they call this moonshine gold. Now we have a tachymeter scale, which you can see is in ceramic within the moonshine gold, and we have a sapphire crystal with a dramatic domed profile to give it the look of a vintage plexi. We have a solid disc of gold that has been sort of revealed. It's been blackened and then it's been etched to create the image of the astronaut descending from the lunar module. We have a matte black dial base with sunken sub-registers and applique indices and hands to match. Now we also have here a vintage Omega logo, another one on the clasp, and if you take a quick look at the dial, you can see that here as well we have a vintage Omega logo. Let's see if I wound this one first. I did. So we have not just a vintage Omega logo, but also the Speedmaster script and the Omega marquee as it's written out. You'll also note numeral 11 replaces the index at 11. And the timepiece features a commemorative caseback. This is all done, I believe, by laser ablation, the same technique that creates the texturing on the movement of the Apollo 8. So one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, inspiring then, inspiring now. And you'll appreciate that inside, Omega was, well, inspired. This was the original vessel for the 3861, still distantly Le Mans based, but more refined than other Moonwatch calibers. Manual wind, now with a 50-hour power reserve, now with a silicon anti-magnetic hairspring, now with a master chronometer certification and a coaxial escapement. It has all of those features, and it's designed with a relatively flat link vintage-inspired bracelet. So as you can see, this watch is part of a series, a rather large series of 6,969 for 1969, and we'll throw it on the wrist. You can see it's got a very different look than a Moonwatch. It's a little bit more upscale. It's a distinctly luxury Moonwatch, so it's part of the tradition and the heritage, but it's not anonymous, and I like that. Here comes the strangest watch on today's program. So this is a model from Speake Marin, the Speake Marin London Chrono, powered by the Valjoux 88. Now, it is a remarkable looking watch on a couple of different levels. Taking a quick look at the dial, it is a triple calendar with raised registers, and it includes a fascinating northern and southern hemisphere moon phase. Let me just make sure I'm correct. Okay, good. It's not in the day change danger zone there. But we have a lovely Piccadilly case, which you can see has straight lugs. They are polished. The strap is held on by bars and screws. This 15-piece limited edition is made of grade 5 titanium, so it is not only very light, it is actually more scratch resistant than steel. The movement was originally created in 1953. It has a 44-hour manual wind power reserve, and as you can see, it has a very vintage look with a column wheel and a lateral clutch. It's nicely executed, and it's attractive to look at. It also has a big slow-beating 18,000 vibration per hour balance. You can see it says on the back of Valjoux 88, and that is related to the Valjoux 23 movement. Limited edition of 15 pieces because these are new old stock movements. They're coming out of storage. There's not an unlimited number of these older well-kept pieces to case up indefinitely. So there were 15 of this model, 15 of a model with gold accents, and you can see that the elements of the chronograph here are silver steel, and then the elements that are bridges and plates of the movement are in gold gilded brass, so very attractive. Taking a quick look at the watch, it has a surprising amount of luminescence, which you can see right here, including the date and the moon phase. And as the lugs are relatively short and stubby, the Speake Marin London Chrono, Valjoux 88, wears large but not oversized. It's a comfortable watch, all in titanium. It's not thin by any means, but it is distinctive. And the timepiece features something that is a limited and scarce commodity, which is a true mid-20th century new old stock chronograph caliber. By the way, the column wheel feel here is excellent. Got two big bruisers, one from Richard Mille. Originally launched in 2004, the RM5 was RM's first automatic watch. It's smaller than the subsequent RM10, and the dimensions basically 38.1 wide by 45.3 millimeters from lug to lug, and the watch has a tonneau case, so it fits nicely. This is really the RM for a lady who wants to wear a man's watch, or a man who doesn't want the bulk of the later RM tonneau cases. So you get that iconic RM tonneau look, but you can see that the lugs come nowhere near the edge of my wrist. You can also see that the case is deceptively thin. Now, taking a quick look here, you can see that the watch is well loomed. If we increase the zoom on the dial, you can see that the dial itself has two sapphires. One is a crystal over the whole movement, and then there's another sapphire underneath on which the numerals are printed. There's a carbon fiber ring outboard that serves as a mounting point for the individual hour indices, and then we have a little window down at 7 o'clock. Don't miss it for the date. Now, the watch does include both a hacking seconds function and a quick set date. You can see there's a large skeletonized date wheel. The movement's made of grade 5 titanium, and it's built for RM by Vaucher. So you can see that titanium movement underneath, and then you can see it again on the opposite side. A few things to note, starting outboard and working our way in, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 attachment points to the case, and at each one there's a little rubber donut that serves as a buffer between the movement and the case, so that helps to make it more shock tolerant. You can see here, we have a free-sprung balance with all the adjustments done using masses on the balance, and that makes the watch fairly shock tolerant as well, both in terms of taking and holding a precise adjustment and in avoiding damage. We also have 2 barrels. It's a 55-hour power reserve. You'll note 5-position adjustment. That is the high horology standard. We have 2 little winglets on the rotor, which can change the polar moment of the rotor to make it wind more actively if you're a very sedentary person, or to tone down the winding efficiency if you're a very active person. This watch gives you that flexibility. Now, at a much, much larger size class, we have this. From Audemars Piguet, this is the Royal Oak Offshore Tourbillon chronograph. Now, this watch launched in 2010 at SIHH. It is 44 millimeters in red gold. It has a forged carbon bezel, and then it has a dial that essentially puts the mechanism on display for your pleasure. So there is plenty of luminescence here. You can see the watch is very well loomed. It's also equipped with 100-meter water resistance. The case is as beautifully hand finished as any Audemars Piguet watch. You can see there are some upgrades, like the little recesses inside the intermediate links. You can see that they're actually satinated outside, media blasted internally. Then you can see that the hoods of the lugs have been evacuated and internally media blasted. We have ceramic caps for the pushers and a shoulder for the crown. And then 2 mainspring barrels. The watch has a 237-hour power reserve, manually wound, so almost 10 days. We have a tourbillon that is a 1-minute tourbillon, free-sprung, 5-position adjusted, equipped with an overcoil hairspring. And of course, we feature a wonderful column wheel chronograph that has superb feel. Pop it all open. There is a lot to see on the reverse side. You can see Audemars Piguet, ARP, that's Audemars Piguet Renault Papi. That is their high horology, and I mean sky-high horology division, because AP is haute horlogerie already, but when you bring in APRP, you're talking about next-level engineering. APRP built the original Lange und Sohne pour le Mérite tourbillon, and the truly complicated RM models get built by APRP. Of course, the movement itself is nicely laid out, so it's also a pleasure to see. You can appreciate the black polished screw atop the column wheel. We have a traditional lateral clutch chrono. The column wheel feel is best in the industry, truly is outstanding. And here too, this caliber 2912 features 5-position adjustment. The finishing is as good as anything you'll find anywhere. That's not always true on AP watches, which often are finished to a price point. This is the kind of watch that has no such reservations in its design or fabrication. This is an uncompromised watch. The only limitation here is going to be the size of your wrist. You're going to need a wrist bigger than mine. My wrist is 16 centimeters in circumference, so assume about 17 centimeters circumference to wear this well. I've long loved Jaeger LeCoultre watches because they offer great value, especially in complications. So this is true horlogerie. It is a watch that includes substantial hand craftsmanship and finishing. It is the JLC Master 8 days Perpetual. So you're getting a lot here. Starting with an 8-day movement. Now the truth is, these movements, when they run to exhaustion, have been able to run for almost 10 days. So 8 days is a very conservative rating. Now, you'll also appreciate that the watch has a perpetual calendar system of IWC design. So there's a little pusher in the flank. The IWC system uses an intermediate crown position to set the calendar, but people would wind up underestimating how high it's geared, and they would put the watch in the wrong position thinking they were about to wind it or set the time, and they would advance the calendar forward a month. Well, with this little pusher adjuster on the flank, it's impossible to inadvertently adjust the calendar using the crown. Now, it is the IWC Kurt Klaus Perpetual Calendar System, which means all you need to do is correct the watch to indicate the right date for the month you're in, and everything else, the day, the date, the month, the moon phase, the year, even the decade, will move into its correct position. So this is a very easy watch to set because it's mechanically programmed. You just advance the date, everything else moves in programmed sync. Now there's a day-night indicator up at the top of the dial, and there is a 8-day power reserve indicator. So as you wind the watch, you can see that power reserve indicator move. The watch has faceted applique dart style indices and half-frosted Dauphine style hands. As you can see, there is absolutely no luminescence. This is a true dress watch. And on the reverse side, you have a movement that is quite handsome. You'll see the likes of this movement in a different shape in the Septentième 8-day 70th anniversary reversos, where it was reverso shaped. You'll also see this movement used in Panerai watches like the PAM 190, 197, and 198. It's modified by Panerai, but it's clearly the same twin barrel 8-day movement designed by JLC. And at 40 millimeters, the watch wears really nice. One of the best things about JLC complications in the 2000s was that you could get them in steel. You didn't have to pay precious metal to get a high horology complication. So this watch with the Kurt Klaus Perpetual Calendar and JLC's 8-day base is still just 40 millimeters in diameter and quite thin for what it is. So this is a nice versatile all-arounder. Yes, it's a dress watch, but it's not going to appear frumpy, so you could wear it casually as well, and it's a good fit for many wrist sizes. And so is this. This, launched in 2014, is the Lange und Sohne 1815 Tourbillon. We'll get a little bit closer. First, you can see that the dial is made of sterling silver, so it's galvanized this silver white color, but the dial itself is actually a disc of sterling silver like a dollar coin, and then it's galvanized to create this whiter silver color. We have hands at center that are fired blue steel, alpha style, and then we have a lovely faceted upper bridge for the tourbillon, which you can see has been faceted on its side, but it's been black polished entirely. The tourbillon carriage is also black polished, and you can see it has a historic shape reminiscent of past Glashütte German tourbillons. We have an overcoil hairspring and a free-sprung architecture, and unusually on a tourbillon, watch the seconds hand, it is not just hacking, it is zero reset, so the seconds hand will return precisely to the index, so you can set this watch against a reference time. 3-day power reserve. The watch is 39.5 millimeters in diameter in red gold, and you can see a lot of distinctive Lange watchmaking traditions, many of them pulled from East German watchmaking antiquity, which is why we have a 3/4 bridge, which is why the jewels for the pivots are in golden chaton fixed by screws, which is why we have a freehand engraved underside to the bridge for the tourbillon. We have both fired blue screws, and if you look carefully, you can see on the tourbillon carriage, we have black polished screws as well. We have mirrored anglage on the edge of the few bridges that are present, as well as engine turning in 2 sizes on the plates. You'll also appreciate stripes, the Glashütte stripes, not Côte de Genève, because we're not in Switzerland. And then everything has a golden hue because the bridges and plates are made of nickel, copper, zinc, an alloy known as Maillot in Switzerland, or German silver everywhere else. So the watch wears really nicely at under 40 millimeters. It's the right size for a modern dress watch. Not petite, not 32 to 35 35 millimeters, but also not over 40 millimeters. And you can see it's flat enough that if you want to wear this with a sleeve, it's going to disappear right under that sleeve. It's compatible with a smaller wrist. It's compatible with tight formal attire. And it's a lovely piece that shows what Lange does so well, sweating the details. And this watch right here has many details. So in 2018, Lange topped its own 2004 innovation. 2004 was the double split, a chronograph able to, let's see if I've wound this one enough, a chronograph able to split both seconds and minutes. So the double split had two hands on the minute register, so you could gauge intervals that were disparate in both seconds and minutes. But now with the triple split, with no compromise in thickness, and a case of the same 43.2 millimeters diameter, you can split the seconds, the minutes, and yes, there are coaxial hands on the hour register. We have a ruthenium-coated dial, which is made of sterling silver. We have a power reserve indicator at 6 o'clock, so we also have that 55-hour manual one power reserve. The watch is also a flyback chronograph. In addition to being a split, you can reset and restart with a single push of the trigger. And surprisingly, for something so formal, it is quite well loomed, and it features a tachymeter scale, which allows you to gauge the speed of an object, such as a race car on a track. The movement is best in the world. In terms of both architecture and finish, you will find no shortage of glory on this case back. Now, everything that's silver is, again, steel, used for the chronograph components. And there's a lot going on. We actually have 1 2-column wheels, and we have an elaborate set of bridges with layered stops to hold the various hands involved. So when you activate the pincer that stops the seconds hand, there's actually a decoupler involved that'll decouple the running seconds hand and the split seconds hand. And the result is that unlike a conventional chronograph with split capability, where you'll see a big drop in balance amplitude as the 2 seconds hands drag against each other, because of the decoupler, when this one is stopped, it doesn't unduly slow down the watch. So that's very important. There is a lot of depth to this movement. You could see it's like peering down through the canopy of a forest. From any angle, you can enjoy it. The finishing is of the same standard as on the 1815 Tourbillon. We just get more of it. And by the way, the column wheel feel is best in the world. It's a large watch, I'm not going to lie. You probably need a wrist at least the size of mine or larger to wear this watch well here. 16 centimeter circumference wrist, no issues. But all in white gold, this 100-piece limited edition is hefty. You definitely know where the money went. It's thin enough to fit underneath a jacket cuff, especially with that domed bezel, but it's probably not sliding underneath a dress cuff or a tight shirt sleeve. Now here we have a watch that won the GPHG Aiguille back in 2015. That is basically the best watch at the GPHG, the Golden Needle or Golden Hand. It's the equivalent of Best Picture at the Oscars. So GPHG is the Academy Award, and this was Best Picture. Now, the watch is the Greubel Forsey Tourbillon 24-second Vision. So the 24 secondes is a 24-second tourbillon, which you can see has this lovely bubble-like observation hemisphere on the reverse side. And you'll also appreciate that both the underside of the tourbillon bridges and the top fully rounded and black polished with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sharp interior angles, and that is just the bridge architecture for the tourbillon. Now, the tourbillon is angled, and it is moving at 1 circuit every 24 seconds, so more than twice the speed of a standard tourbillon. And because of the angle at which it sits, I believe these 24-second tourbillon watches feature 25-degree inclines. It will rotate and gyrate through several different orientations with respect to gravity, evening out the effect of gravity on the timing of the watch, especially when it's on your dresser at night. Now, the dial is a disc of solid gold. We have fired steel hands in blue. The watch is a part of a limited edition, and 22 is the edition number. Throwing it on my wrist, You can see that at 43.5 millimeters, this is actually a reasonable size for a Greubel Forsey watch. It's no more difficult to wear than the Lange, and it actually feels a little bit thinner. You can see it has Greubel Forsey's distinctive lug profiles, which are a little bit concave, and it's fairly minimalist as Greubel Forsey watches go. It doesn't seem too outrageous. Outrageous, sure, but not bonkers. Now on the reverse side, you can see we have a little bit of complication. In addition to the tourbillon, we have a power reserve indicator. The scale is made of white gold. It's then lacquered to give you the 0 to 72. You can see that we have lovely frosted bridges, and you can see again those sharp interior angles where bevels meet. This watch has no shortage of them. Extremely difficult to achieve. We have here pressed in golden chaton, the pivot jewels. You can see the barrels stacked below, and we also have enormous fired blue screws on the reverse side here. This watch, again, at absolutely no loss for fine detail. If you want to know why Greubel Forsey finish is often described as the best in the industry, look no further. Reach out to Team Osso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.